Tia Christine Sharp was born to parents Stephen and Natalie on the 30th of June 2000. Stephen split from Natalie when their daughter was a baby. Despite her parents' separation, her family was incredibly close-knit and they lived in Croydon, South London. Tia had a deep and close bond with her maternal grandmother Christine. Tia, Natalie, and Christine are a tight family unit, with Natalie saying the three of them were friends as well as family. The bond continues as Tia grows up, with Christine saying Tia would occasionally call her mom. The love that Natalie had for Tia was reciprocated as Tia adored her mother in return, and the pair were inseparable. Tia saw her father every holiday until the relationship between Stephen and Natalie soured. As she entered secondary school, Tia was confident, happy, and never afraid to voice her opinion and have herself be heard. She was feisty and brave, with her mom saying she was often the loudest in the room. In 2002, Christine was working as a barmaid in a pub in Rains Park, southwest London. It was here that she met a man named Stuart Hazel. He was 10 years her junior, and they started a relationship in 2007, with Stuart moving into her home in New Addington. Natalie had had a fling with Hazel before he began seeing her mother. He shared a good bond with Tia and she called him Granddad, as did Tia's two younger brothers. Although she achieved good grades in school and was popular with her teachers, her attendance was an issue. In 2008, social services became concerned with Natalie and her partner using cannabis, and therefore became involved with the family. A report issued by social services said that while there was no neglect or abuse towards Tia, the family and family dynamic was dysfunctional. After carrying out a probe into Tia's chaotic home life, social workers concluded in November 2011 that no further assessment would be needed. Instead, it was decided that Tia schools should be asked to keep an eye on her and report any concerns. Tia would regularly spend the night with Christine and Stuart. Even when Christine had to work a night shift, she would stay there with her step-grandfather. In June 2012, Tia was celebrating her birthday with her mother and grandmother. She had the option to bring a friend along for the celebrations, and she chose Stuart, illustrating how close she was to him. August 2012. On the notes to Natalie, Tia had messaged her grandmother and Stuart, asking if it was okay if she stayed there for a couple of days. Stuart sent a text message to Natalie saying that Tia was welcome to stay. Christine wouldn't be there, but she could still stay if she wanted to. Tia was excited to go. She ran to kiss her mother goodbye and then set off to her grandmother's house. Thursday, August 2nd. Stuart meets Tia as she gets off the tram at 4:50 p.m. and CCTV follows them as they go shopping in New Addington. Later that night, Christine called the house and spoke to Stuart asking if everything was okay, and he confirmed it was, and they were playing on the PlayStation together. The following day, Friday, August 3rd, Christine returned home from work and Stuart told her that Tia had gone into Croydon to buy some new shoes, 5 miles away in the Wick Gift Center. By 6 o'clock that night, she still hadn't returned home, so Christine phoned Natalie, who confirmed she hadn't seen her either. They tried contacting her via text message and Facebook, but heard nothing back. They decided to go driving around the area to see if they could spot her, hoping perhaps the public transport was running late and that was causing a delay. By 10 o'clock and with still no sign, Christine, Stuart, and Natalie headed to the police station to report her as missing. Stuart told the investigators that he had seen Tia around midday before she headed into Croydon to go shopping. A phone call from a neighbor also suggested that they had seen her leaving the property. They searched the house where she had been staying with her grandmother and Stuart, but no trace of her was found. As she clearly wasn't in the house, the police widened their investigation to the local area. The story of the missing 12-year-old spreads like wildfire, with major news outlets picking up on the story. Stuart Hazel was seen leading one of the searches. Police said that she had only taken a small amount of money with her and did not take her travel card or her mobile phone, adding that this was very out of character for her. Area Commander Neil Bessu stressed the investigation was still a missing persons inquiry and did not suggest there were any suspects in the case. The family were absolutely distraught. Natalie told a local news outlet, "We all feel terrible. We think she's been taken, but we just don't know. There's no CCTV. We know absolutely nothing. I wish to God I could tell you something. My baby girl walked out and she vanished." On August 7th, a press conference was held. DCI Nick Scholar gave the press and public a description of the missing Tia. Tia's uncle David Sharp also made an appeal, begging for her to come home. There were 55 different sightings reported by members of the public, but the police weren't able to substantiate any of them. As Stuart Hazel was the last person to see Tia alive, he felt as if that made him a potential suspect, and so contacted ITV to give an interview and clear his name. On August 9th, he gave an interview to Mark Williams Thomas, an investigative journalist and former police officer for ITV News, denying that he had anything to do with the disappearance of his step-granddaughter. In the middle of his interview, Christine came home and Hazel removed his microphone to pause the interview and offer her comfort. As there was still no sign of Tia, the police decided to conduct another search of the house, this time with the assistance of police dogs, but still no trace of Tia was found. A week after she had been reported missing on Friday the 10th of August, and a day after he had given the interview with ITV, Stuart Hazel got up early and left the house. When Christine later woke up, she smelt something in her house but couldn't locate where it was coming from. When the police arrived, they asked her to leave the house immediately so they could conduct another search. That afternoon, a fourth and final search was conducted of the house in New Addington. In the attic, they found a body. Due to the heat and the fact the body had been wrapped up and stored in the attic, the body had decomposed to the point where the person was visually unidentifiable. Croydon Central MP Gavin Barwell said, "The police have yet to formally confirm that the body is Tia's, yet this devastating development will come as a huge blow to her family and the community in New Addington, all of whom have worked tirelessly to try and find her over the past week." The postmortem on the body began the same day the discovery had been made, August 10th, and was paused later that day. By the 16th of August, the postmortem still had not been completed. However, at an inquest into the death which opened that day, it was confirmed that the body was that of Tia Sharp. Due to the state of decomposition, dental records had to be used to identify her. The postmortem was later concluded without establishing a cause of death. Experts told This Is Croydon Today that the delay in finding the body had made it much harder to determine exactly how Tia had died, and without a cause of death, the prosecution would find it much harder to build. However, detectives suspected, and it was widely reported, that Tia Sharp had potentially been smothered, although this was not officially proven to be the cause of death. Area Commander Neil Bissu said the priority was now to support her devastated family as they tried to ascertain exactly what had happened. With Tia's body now being found, the eyes of investigators quickly fell on one person, Christine's partner, Stuart Hazel. But officers soon realized that Hazel was on the run. He was picked up on CCTV buying a bottle of vodka from a shop on Canning Hill Lane in South London. They warned the public not to approach him if they saw him, and to instead call 999. The police quickly mobilized and launched a search to try and find him. Following a tip-off from a member of the public who had spotted him, he was arrested at 825 on Cannon Hill Common in Morden. As he was taken away in a police van, members of the public hurled abuse as it went past. The police also announced soon after that they had made 2 further arrests. Later that evening at 11:55, Christine was arrested on suspicion of murder, and her neighbor had been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. While Christine was being questioned, Natalie had to watch on television as her daughter's body was removed from the home. Due to the state of decomposition, Natalie was not allowed to see her daughter's body. Since news of the discovery broke, several people laid tributes for her near a garage close to her grandmother's house, which still had a cordon in place on the approach to it. Christine was later released on bail but would not be allowed anywhere near Natalie or her other grandchildren. The police soon started to learn the sinister truth about the man Tia had called Granddad. Stuart Hazel came from a highly dysfunctional background and had a troubled relationship with his parents. During his childhood, he was on the radar of social services as his father was in prison and his mother was a sex worker. He would also soon end up in care. He struggled in school and would often skip classes, and according to Dr. Kerry Nixon, it was also clear that he had a low IQ. Hazel would later say that he had been raped when he was 16 years old. He had 30 previous convictions and had been to prison 3 times. His convictions included dealing drugs, burglary, criminal damage, theft, as well as racially motivated violence and grievous bodily harm, also known as GBH. As Hazel was still using drugs, this would often lead him to continued reckless behavior. For example, in 2010, he was convicted of carrying a machete and was subsequently given a 12-month custodial sentence. Despite this, Christine stood by him and said she never saw any violent behavior in the home. She said although he drank and had a criminal record, he was a gentle giant. She was prepared to put his past from before they met behind them. She was unaware of the extent of his drug abuse and his increasingly sinister thoughts. As Tia continued to grow up, little did she or her family know that Hazel was having sexual fantasies about her. He was fascinated and fixated with her and was convinced that she loved him. He became infatuated with her, and as she started to develop into a young woman, these feelings started to intensify. In the last year of her life, he became increasingly more voyeuristic and started filming her in secret. On one occasion, she came home from school and started to put cream on her legs as they were dry, and he started to secretly record her. His filming of Tia was growing increasingly sinister, and he started filming her while she was asleep. Nick Scola, who was the senior investigating officer, described one of these occasions. Hazel had filmed her while she was asleep, getting very close to her but then pulling back when she stirred. He then panned the camera up to the wall momentarily to film his shadow looking over her. He removed the door on the bathroom and messed with the light fitting in her bedroom, which police later believed was so he could use that as a spy hole to watch her. He also began watching and searching for more extreme and violent pornography on his phone, including pedophilia. It has been suggested by forensic psychologist Dr. Carrie Nixon that Hazel may have made sexual advances towards Tia and murdered her when she rejected said advances and threatened to tell her mother. One thing that many people wanted answers to was why had it taken 4 searches to find her body in the attic. Investigators apologized to the family, saying this was the result of human error. Commander Neil Bissu apologized to Tia Sharp's mother for the delay in finding her body. He said that a review would be undertaken to ensure such a failing is not repeated. On the 23rd of August, Police Commissioner Bernard Hogan addressed the failure of his force to find her body. He said, "If we thought it was an individual human error, then that would explain it. But we're carrying out a review because we're not happy that explains it. We're trying not to have a knee-jerk reaction. We need some time to understand what happened and what failed to happen. We want to learn lessons from this particular case. We have apologized, and I repeat that apology to Tia's mom and family for not having found Tia's body sooner." As Christine was released on bail, investigators turned their attention back to Stuart Hazel. He gave a defense case statement which said that he and Tia had been messing around and playing. During this, he alleged that she had fallen down the stairs, but appeared to be unharmed and okay. He then said that after drinking excessively through the evening, he passed out and upon waking up, he found her dead on the floor and as a result hid her body in the attic. Once in the attic, he put her between the rafters and pushed her tight against the roof, where the roof met the floor in a dark area of the loft, covering the body with debris from around the attic. Next to the body, carefully wrapped in small plastic bags, inside a black bin bag, were Tia's clothes that she was wearing that night, as well as her broken glasses. Christine was subsequently cleared of having any involvement in her granddaughter's killing, and on the 7th of December, the Metropolitan Police announced that she would not face charges. In a previous search, officers had found 2 memory cards, one of which was very well hidden in a doorframe of a downstairs room. The memory cards in question contained both deleted and undeleted material, made up of photos and videos. The last shot on the memory card had been deleted, but officers were able to recover it. The image was of Tia, who had been posed in a sexually suggestive position. They showed the image in question to a pathologist, who determined that she was likely dead when the photograph had been taken. Other images showed Hazel posing naked in a similar position to the one she was seen in the photograph. The memory card also contained voyeuristic images of Tia taken when she was alive. In the early hours of the 12th of August, Hazel was charged with murder of the girl who had called him granddad. He appeared before Camberwell Green Magistrates Court on the August 13th via a video link. Dressed in a blue t-shirt, he was seen on the video link sitting at a table with a policewoman standing behind him. He spoke to confirm his name, date of birth and his address as the Lindens, New Addington, South London, where Tia had been found dead. No plea was entered and the case was committed to the Old Bailey Courthouse in London for trial. He was remanded in custody to Belmarsh Prison, where was kept in isolation for his own safety. While in prison awaiting trial, Stuart Hazel wrote a letter to his father, and he was sticking to his story. He described her death as an accident and denied there was any sexual motive. His main concern was that his father didn't think his son was a nonce, a slang term for a pedophile. The Sharp was cremated on the 14th of September after a private family funeral. On the February 5, 2013, the neighbor who had been arrested at the same time as Christine was charged with wasting police time. After telling the police he had seen Tia alive on the day she was murdered. He appeared at Croydon Magistrates Court on the February 28, 2013, where he denied the charge against him and was released on bail for a one-day trial on July 29. On the August 5, 2013, he was found guilty of wasting police time and was sentenced to 5 months in prison. After an agonizing investigation, it was soon time for the trial of Stuart Hazel, and his plea was not guilty. He showed no emotion during his trial and refused to acknowledge any of Tia's family. The courtroom was shocked when they were shown the images that had been taken of Tia. When the photo of her that had been taken post-mortem was shown to the jury, her mother Natalie had to leave the courtroom traumatized and in tears. After 4 days of distressing evidence being given, Stuart Hazel changed his plea to guilty. However, he refused to reveal exactly what happened that night or why he had taken her life in the most brutal way imaginable. When sentencing Hazel, the judge emphasized how the trust Christine and Natalie had placed in him had been shattered. He received life in prison with a minimum term of 38 years that he must serve before he can even be considered for parole. This will mean he will be 75 years old before he is eligible. The judge, Mr. Justice Nicol, said he could not impose a whole life tariff, as he was not sure Hazel's motivation was sexual or that it was premeditated. He said, the aftermath of Tia's death was felt by so many people. The house that Christine and Stuart had lived in and where Tia had been murdered was demolished in 2013. In July 2013, her father Stephen Carter said he backed a plan for websites to block certain search terms and warn people when they try and view illegal content. In November 2013, partly in response to the murders of Tia Sharp and April Jones, a little girl who was abducted and murdered by a stranger, the search engines Google and Bing modified their systems to block results from searches aimed at producing child abuse images. Tia Sharp was a confident, happy, and feisty young girl whose trust was betrayed in the most appalling way imaginable. Those who knew and loved her are determined that she will be remembered for the joy she brought to so many people, and not by the tragic way that she left this earth. The case of Megan Landowski, who lived near the Chesapeake Bay in Portsmouth, Virginia, a bustling seaport town that is home to both the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. Megan's family included Navy officer Chris Short, his wife Angela, and their 3 stepchildren, Elizabeth Gable, Megan Landowski, and Corey Landowski. Having spent a year stationed at the naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Chris was transferred to a naval hospital in Portsmouth, which was a relief for his family. Megan Landowski, the eldest sibling at 16 years old, promptly enrolled in dance classes after their relocation. Megan had a deep passion for dance and exhibited remarkable talent and aptitude from the beginning, starting with ballet and quickly expanding her repertoire to include various dance genres. Her mother described her as beautiful, friendly, and talented, and Megan easily integrated into her new academic environment. At Woodrow Wilson High School, Megan had a magnetic personality that effortlessly attracted classmates, allowing her to quickly forge friendships. Although she attended a prestigious high school primarily focused on dance, Megan expressed a desire to attend a regular high school in order to be with friends from her neighborhood. Described as vivacious and kind, Megan had a natural inclination for making connections and embracing friendships with everyone she encountered. Thursday, April 10, 2008, dawned like any other bright spring morning. Megan woke up early from school, engaging in a conversation with her mother regarding an impending test before heading off for her classes. After exchanging farewells, they went their separate ways, unaware that this would be the last time Angela laid eyes on her daughter alive. Megan's school day ended early and she went home. Her mother told her to call when she reached home. Upon arrival, Megan left a voicemail detailing how her day went, reassuring her mother of her safe return and ending by telling her she loved her. She then went on to begin preparing lunch for herself. However, things took a dark and disturbing turn around 4 p.m. that afternoon. Chris, Megan's stepfather, returned home to find the front door open. Though initially unconcerned, knowing Megan had been warned about leaving it open, he intended to reprimand her. Calling out her name yielded only silence as he moved through the house. Upon entering the kitchen, he was confronted with a harrowing sight. Megan, lifeless on the floor, a victim of murder. Chris would later recall how he found her, likening her to a porcelain doll, hauntingly still and staring out into the void. Local detective Doug Funkhauser was on his way to celebrate his anniversary with his wife when he received the distressing call about a young girl's murder in town. Rushing to Roberts Court in Portsmouth, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. Blood stains on the door handle caught his attention as he approached the residence. Inside, in the kitchen, he discovered the gruesome scene. The teenager's partially naked body sprawled on the floor. Megan lay amidst a sizable pool of blood, bearing multiple stab wounds across her back, neck, face, and throat, with her mouth sealed shut with tape. For Detective Funkhauser, a seasoned investigator, this case stood out as one of the most brutal he had ever encountered, compounded by the fact that the victim was a young child. The thought of his own 3 children intensified his determination to bring the perpetrator to justice. Despite Megan not inviting the killer into her house, there were no signs of forced entry. However, a leaf found inside, traced back to the bush by the window, showed that the assailant had entered through the first-floor window. The attack started in an upstairs bedroom, evident from the messy bed that indicated a struggle. Her underwear was on the floor, and a tape dispenser under the left corner of the bed matched the tape used to bind her. Blood-stained tape was collected for analysis. Police took pillows, sheets, and blankets for forensic examination. Disturbing evidence was found in the bedroom. Seminal fluid on the duvet and in Megan's underwear suggested she was sexually assaulted before the brutal attack downstairs. Megan had 43 stab wounds, 11 after her death. She was discovered naked from the waist down with her arms bound behind her with tape. The forensic team quickly identified the potential murder weapon. They found a knife missing from the kitchen counter holder, eventually locating it in the sink. Megan was first attacked in her room, but escaped downstairs before being fatally assaulted. The perpetrator moved through the house, leaving footprints and washed their hands in the sink, leaving behind one of the 2 knives used in the murder. The other knife, taken from the kitchen block, was found in a storm drain nearby. Detectives realized they had to apprehend the murderer promptly. The investigation began swiftly, with officers thoroughly searching the area, looking for witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious during the crime. Unfortunately, no one provided any useful information, and it seemed like the culprit had fled unnoticed. The town was gripped by fear, with parents worried about their children's safety, many too scared to sleep at night, aware that a killer was on the loose. After their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris quickly told the police they suspected Robert Hickey, a friend of Chris from the Navy who had a troubled past. When Megan was 16, Robert, who also worked with Chris, sexually assaulted her. Megan started acting differently and doing poorly in school. Chris noticed and asked her what was wrong. Eventually, Megan admitted that Robert was abusing her. Chris was angered and disgusted, immediately cutting off all connections with the Hickey family and reporting the abuse. At this point, Megan's parents had initiated legal action just 5 months before her murder, with a trial awaiting. They now suspected that Robert had killed Megan to prevent her from testifying against him, fearing the potential damage to his reputation and the risk of incarceration. Megan had even voiced concerns about him coming after her, and tragically it appeared her apprehensions had materialized. Officers went to Hickey's house looking for evidence related to a murder, but they didn't find anything incriminating. However, when they checked his computer later on, They saw that someone had tried to delete everything on the hard drive. A file that had been recently deleted was found, showing illegal pictures of underage kids. This led to Hickey being charged with having child pornography and made him the main suspect in the murder case. He was brought in for questioning regarding the murder, with authorities hoping for a confession. Despite appearing visibly nervous during the interview, Robert claimed to have been at the Navy base the entire day of Megan's murder, denying any involvement and asserting that he had not left the base on the day of the incident. After corroborating his timeline with his colleagues, the police realized that there was a period of time during which Robert hadn't been seen, raising the possibility of his involvement in the murder. Surveillance footage from the base was obtained, but no sign of Robert leaving was observed. Nevertheless, he remained a suspect and couldn't be entirely ruled out. A DNA swab was taken from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene, and the results came as a surprise. There was no match. Robert was not Megan's killer. This setback left the officers feeling disheartened as they found themselves without any leads or suspects. Attention then shifted towards Chris, who had discovered her body. After obtaining a DNA sample, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Additionally, all of Megan's family members, including her younger brother Corey, were also cleared of any involvement. An autopsy later revealed the extreme brutality of the murder, with Megan being subjected to what was termed as overkill. The level of violence suggested intense anger from the perpetrator, raising questions about their motive given Megan's popularity and apparent lack of enemies. It seemed likely that the culprit was someone known to her, but with no apparent enemies, the mystery deepened regarding who would commit such a horrific act. As the investigation yielded no suspects, Megan's parents grappled with the unsettling prospect of her case remaining unresolved, depriving them of justice for their daughter. Detectives decided to delve deeper into Megan's school life, considering the possibility of a clandestine boyfriend, an admirer, or an adversary within her school community. They interrogated Megan's close friend in hopes of uncovering potential leads, but she was unable to provide any valuable insights. Subsequently, police interviewed other acquaintances from Woodrow Wilson High School, revealing that Megan had been involved in a few romantic relationships, but none of them were particularly serious. While none of these individuals emerged as suspects, the authorities decided to collect DNA samples from them as a precautionary measure, to eliminate any potential connections. Forensic experts specializing in biogeographical analysis re-examined the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene in an effort to determine the geographical origin of the perpetrator. Their analysis suggested that they were searching for an African-American male. Despite 6 months elapsing with no significant progress in the case, a breakthrough occurred when a cooperative classmate provided the police with valuable information. A list of boys with whom Megan had occasionally engaged in flirtatious interactions. Upon review, all individuals on the list except one had already been interviewed. This exception was 17-year-old Robert Lee Barnes. In addition to her regular school education, Megan had also been enrolled in a performing arts program at Churchill High School, where Robert Barnes was also a participant. Megan had once told her close friend that she believed Robert had feelings for her, feelings she did not reciprocate. Robert Barnes, a talented violinist, was regarded as a diligent student who never encountered any disciplinary issues at school and was not known to cause trouble. He shared a close friendship with Megan and had even visited her home on several occasions, according to her parents, who described him as always polite and very kind. When the police located him for questioning regarding Megan, the interview followed the standard procedure, just like the other previous interviews they had carried out. Robert informed investigators that Megan was a kind and pleasant individual, expressing disbelief at the notion of anyone wishing her harm. He mentioned their participation in a recital together and their occasional hangouts. The police did not find anything suspicious during the interview until towards the end, when they asked Robert if he would provide a DNA sample. Robert hesitated before refusing, which raised eyebrows among the investigators, since all of Megan's other classmates had been cooperative. Robert politely explained that his mother wouldn't agree to it, but the police clarified that parental consent wasn't necessary, especially considering Robert was now 17 years old. Despite this, Robert declined once again. The investigators couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Robert Barnes. After concluding the interview, they instructed him to seek his mother's consent for the DNA sample and to contact them afterward. Later, the detective received a call from the lab analyzing the bubble gum. They inquired about the sample's origin and, after confirming that he had observed Robert placing the gum into the glove, questioned whether he had been under constant observation. To their surprise, the DNA matched the sample matched that of a female. Robert had switched the gum he was chewing with a different piece that he provided as his sample on October 23, 2008. Robert Barnes was summoned for questioning once more, this time accompanied by his mother. During the interview, when confronted with the DNA findings, Robert inadvertently revealed that the incident had occurred on a Thursday. Up to that point, none of the individuals interviewed by the police had been aware of the exact day and date of the murder. When the officers pointed this out to him, he provided an absurd explanation, claiming that on that particular day, Megan had asked him to come to her home, where he allegedly discovered her being held at gunpoint by a masked individual. According to Robert, the assailant then pointed the firearm at him and forced him to tie Megan up. Robert further claimed that he was compelled to sexually assault Megan under duress. Subsequently, he stated that they all went downstairs where the gunman seized a knife and stabbed Megan. Robert claimed that the assailant then forced him to cut himself, ensuring his blood would be found at the crime scene. Robert had fabricated this narrative in an attempt to present himself as a victim and explain away any potentially incriminating evidence against him. However, law enforcement remained skeptical of his account and did not believe any of his claims. When confronted with the evidence of footprints, they questioned why only his footprints were found and not those of the alleged assailant. Robert's mother intervened, advising him to stop speaking and vouching for his character, claiming he was a good and innocent child. The police collected a sample of his DNA and the analysis confirmed a match between Robert's DNA and the assailant, contradicting his claims. Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Landowski. The news left Megan's parents in shock, as they could not comprehend how the quiet boy who used to ride the school bus with their daughter could be capable of such violence. According to the police, Robert likely gained entry to the home through the window that afternoon, surprising Megan in her bedroom before committing the atrocious acts. Megan managed to flee downstairs, but Robert pursued her, stabbing her with a kitchen knife and continuing to do so even after her death. Afterward, he left the scene and carried on with his life as if nothing had occurred. The investigators speculated that Robert had developed an unhealthy obsession with Megan, while Megan only wanted a platonic relationship between them. When Robert's advances were rejected, he resorted to coercion, which ultimately led him down a destructive path that culminated in tragedy. In September 2009, Robert accepted a plea bargain that spared him from being tried as an adult, as he had recently turned 18. He pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual battery. Robert Lee Barnes was sentenced to 42 years in prison and remains incarcerated at the Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. Whether driven by love, desire, bitterness, or the sting of rejection, Robert's actions and atrocious deeds towards someone he claimed to love and care for were not justified. Instead of accepting to move on, he chose a dark path that led to a tragic fate, ending the life of an innocent soul, and in the process, ruining his life and affecting the lives of Megan's loved ones. Megan Landowski's tragic story mirrors countless others, highlighting the perilous consequences that can arise from such situations. We extend our heartfelt prayers and thoughts to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. This case takes us back to April 2013, to the most populated city in Yolo County, California, Davis. Oliver Jennings Northup Jr., known to most people as Chip, was born in 1925 in Grand Island, Nebraska. He served in the United States Navy during World War II and also worked as an attorney. He loved law, but people said he was always pulling towards writing. He read a lot and loved memorizing classic passages of literature. Chip loved the arts and had been playing guitar since his 30s, performing in different bands. He was also a founding member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Davis. Claudia Maureen Maupin, born in 1936, was described by her daughter as a spiritual traveler, moving throughout different religions and denominations. But when she discovered the Unitarian Church, she felt an instant connection, so much so that she said to her daughter, "My husband is at the Unitarian Church." And sure enough, he was. Claudia met Chip there, and they soon fell in love, marrying in 1996. Claudia became a pastoral associate at the church and, just like Chip, she loved performing and was very active in her local theater. Her family said she had such a loving spirit and an ability to make everyone she encountered feel valued. Between the two of them, they had a big and loving family, and Chip's daughter Mary said their families blended together effortlessly. Claudia had 3 children and Chip had 6, along with 2 stepchildren from a previous marriage, and they had 14 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren between them. In 2013, the couple had been married for 17 years and were living in a condo in Cowell Boulevard. Their family said they were living an idyllic life, surrounded by so many people that loved them, living in a great community. Tragically, in April that year, Chip and Claudia's family and friends, and the community, would be left shattered by a truly frightening series of events. Daniel William Marsh was born on May 14, 1997. In 2008, Daniel made national headlines. He received an American Red Cross Heroes Award for saving his father Bill's life. Bill had had a heart attack and Daniel had used CPR to save him. But the same year, things would quickly start to unravel for Daniel. His parents began a tough and contentious divorce after it was discovered that his mother had had an affair with Daniel's former kindergarten teacher. Daniel was enraged with the woman his mother had had an affair with, and at 10 years old, he started having dark thoughts. He fantasized about killing his teacher by strangling her or slitting her throat. A year later, he told his therapist about the thoughts that he had been having and how he was fascinated with the idea of torture. He told the therapist he wanted to make these fantasies a reality. He was diagnosed with adjustment disorder with depressed mood, and as he entered 7th grade, he started seeing a clinical social worker. In August 2010, he was prescribed 1 to 2 capsules of Prozac daily. Daniel entered his teenage years going back and forth between his parents' houses, who were now living apart. But when he turned 14, his dad threw him out for good due to his constant drinking and smoking, and he went to live with his mother permanently. In 2011, Daniel developed anorexia and was placed in an intensive outpatient program to help treat him. Following his release, he began taking Celexa, which was then switched to Lexapro, and then back to Prozac. He was also given antipsychotic medication. A doctor noted that Daniel had started having feelings of derealization, with his out-of-body experiences occurring numerous times a week. The more time went on, the more Daniel's violent thoughts manifested. Whenever he looked at a person, he thought about how he would kill them. He developed a fascination with a site called bestgore.com, promoting gore porn and other videos showing gory content, and Daniel started setting fires and harming animals too. He also became interested in serial killers, showing a particular fascination with Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. According to one of his friends, Daniel strangled a cat in the street and said to his friends, "I just wanted to. I hated that cat." He then asked his friend if he could kill his dog too. Daniel confided in a school counselor about his thoughts, and as a result, the police were called to the school. Daniel was involuntarily hospitalized, and his medication was switched yet again. Daniel later told his school psychologist about wanting to kill his classmates, possibly even by way of a school massacre. When the counselor asked if he would ever act on these feelings, he said, "I have full confidence that I could hurt these people." Following this, a police officer was again brought to the school, but at this time it was determined that Daniel posed no danger to himself or others, and no further action was taken. Soon after this, Daniel had another meeting with the school counselor, this time going into even more detail, describing how he wanted to peel people's skin off them and cut off their eyelids. He said that these fantasies only scratched the surface of his thoughts, and that he had given up fighting them. However, Daniel's statements were not disclosed to the authorities, because it was agreed upon that there were no identified victims. Daniel made no attempts to hide his disturbed feelings and impulses, and began divulging his secrets more and more. Friends of Daniel later recalled that he said if he killed anyone and got caught, he would simply claim insanity, but Daniel's dark fantasies would soon manifest in a terrifying way. That morning, Chip and Claudia were unusually absent from their church. No one had heard from them, and their phone was ringing out. Later on, Chip failed to show up for a gig with his band. After nearly 5 decades as the guitarist and lead singer, Chip was never known to be a no-show. Chip's son Robert visited the couple's condo, but soon left, assuming the pair had simply gone out of town. But as the evening came around, and there was still no word from either of them, family members contacted the authorities requesting a welfare check be carried out. Claudia's daughter Laura, along with the police, went to the couple's home again. After ringing the doorbell and getting no answer, Laura went round the back. She and the officers found one of the windows open, with the window screen slashed. Looking through the bedroom window, they saw bloodstains. Police used a flashlight to look into the couple's bedroom, and tragically, the bodies of 87-year-old Chip and 76-year-old Claudia could be made out. They were found with over 60 stab wounds each, and their bodies had been mutilated. Inside Claudia's abdomen was a mobile phone, and a drinking glass had been put into Chip's body too. The Yolo County District Attorney said, "It was the most horrific, depraved murder I've ever seen as the district attorney of this county. The appalling murders of such a beloved couple stunned the Davis community and left everyone in a state of fear and shock. Numerous task force investigators from different areas, including 25 FBI agents, jumped on board the case. However, no physical evidence could be found at the scene. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, and no footprints. Nothing of value appeared to have been stolen, and police weren't even sure if they were looking for one perpetrator or more. No one that knew the couple could think of any possible motive. The crime seemed incredibly personal, and officers wondered if the killer or killers were close to Chip and Claudia, possibly even having a key to the condo and cutting the window as a distraction. Oliver, Chip's grandson, was briefly looked at when police found out he had schizophrenia. Robert, Chip's son, and Oliver's father said as a family they faced 2 days of over 12 hours of questioning. But Robert said he knew his father would have wanted everyone to cooperate as much as possible, so they stuck it out without a lawyer present. When police searched Robert's home, they found that the carpet had been steam cleaned on the same day the couple had been killed, something which Robert agreed, although didn't look good, was nothing more than bad timing. They also found a picture drawn by Tony, Robert's son, which depicted a man holding a knife, standing over 2 children in a bed. Chip and Claudia's family said that Tony and Oliver were so close to Chip. They both adored him and would never have acted in any violent way towards him or Claudia. The Northup family, Tony in particular, felt incredibly persecuted, and as if the finger was being pointed at him. Even though Tony's name was eventually cleared, he still felt that many people had their doubts about him, and this left him carrying a huge burden following such intense questioning and accusatory comments from so many people. Sadly, 3 years after the couple's deaths, Tony would take his own life. While the police were still working around the clock to solve the crime, the real killer was so proud of what they had done, it didn't take long for them to start bragging about it to people. On the same day the couple were found, Daniel Marsh told a close friend that he had been the one to commit the horrific crime. The following day, he confessed again to more people. He asked his girlfriend if she had heard about what had happened to the couple, to which she said she hadn't. Daniel then also told her that he had done it, smiling and telling her how amazing it had felt, and proudly giving her all the details. Daniel could not stop telling people, and in the days and weeks that followed, he continued to talk about it to anyone that would listen, saying that it was the best experience he had ever had. And if his confession wasn't enough, he showed a friend several items that linked him to the crime scene, including the knife, gloves, and the ski cap, boots, and jacket he had worn that night. Daniel's friend and Daniel's girlfriend started speaking with each other about what Daniel had told them. They did not initially report his confessions to anyone else, as they were unsure if he was telling the truth, and if he was being truthful, they were afraid of what Daniel might do. Disturbingly, Daniel's mood appeared to improve after the murders of Chip and Claudia, and he was even named Student of the Month. But just a short while later, one of his friends informed the school that Daniel was carrying a knife around with him. Following this, he was suspended. Daniel's girlfriend broke up with him, and shortly after, Daniel crept into her house, leaving her fearing for her life. His ex-girlfriend confided in one of Daniel's friends about the incident, which prompted him to talk to Daniel's father, Bill. He told him about the murders and what Daniel had said, but Bill believed none of it. His friends finally contacted the police and spent several hours in the station telling them everything. The next day, on June 17th, a high school resource officer brought the now 16-year-old Daniel in for questioning. Daniel was interrogated by Detective Ariel Pineda and FBI Special Agent Chris Campion. Daniel's tune had drastically changed, and he spent 3.5 hours crying and denying any involvement. But when Detective Pineda played a recording of a phone call between two other people implicating Daniel in the crimes, Daniel's denials came to an end, and he started to confess. Daniel admitted to leaving his mother's house with the intention of killing that night. He left between 2 and 3 a.m. armed with a 6-inch knife and spent time wandering around the streets of Davis looking for open doors and windows. Daniel said he had found what he was looking for at 4006 Cowell Boulevard, a residence just 2 doors down from where his dad lived. He could open a window screen and crawled through the window. He waited in the living room until he heard the sounds of snoring coming from the bedroom, and then entered. It was at that point that Claudia woke up and saw Daniel and started to scream. Daniel started stabbing her in the torso, with Claudia begging for her life. Chip woke up too, and Daniel then turned the knife on him. Daniel described continuing to stab the couple even after they had died, saying it just felt right. He told the officers what he had done in gruesome and graphic detail, and told them all the evidence they needed was in his mother's garage. He had kept the bloodied clothing and knife as souvenirs, and it was determined that he had put tape around his shoes to avoid leaving footprints. During his interrogation, Daniel said, "It was pure happiness and adrenaline and dopamine, just all of it rushing over me." He said these feelings were only heightened when Chip and Claudia were conscious and resisting against the attack. Daniel was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, with special enhancements for intentionally killing more than one person, demonstrating exceptional depravity in the killings, lying in wait to kill the victims, and inflicting torture. He also faced enhancements for the use of a deadly weapon during the murders. Daniel Marsh entered a plea of not guilty, but later changed this to not guilty by reason of insanity, something officers were already anticipating. Daniel was set to be tried as an adult, although his juvenile status made him ineligible for the death penalty and life in prison without parole. The maximum sentence he faced was 52 years to life. Daniel's attorneys, 2 of the top public defenders, argued that the maximum sentence would constitute cruel and unusual punishment when imposed on the juvenile, but prosecutors were fighting hard for the maximum possible sentence to be issued, believing nothing else would be appropriate. Assistant Chief Deputy DA Michael Cabral said that in the almost 3 decades he had been a prosecutor, he had never seen such a heinous and reprehensible act or a defendant with such an evil soul. Daniel's defense team called in a psychiatrist, Dr. Matthew Sullier. When he first met Daniel, Daniel threatened to kill him. He found Daniel to be mentally ill, but sane and responsible for the crimes. Despite this, Daniel's attorneys pressed on with the insanity defense and filed a motion to suppress his June 17th confession, arguing that the interrogation began under false pretenses and that Daniel had made many requests to go home. His attorneys also argued that the various different medications Daniel had been prescribed over the years had had a huge effect on his violent thoughts and fantasies, but the prosecution maintained that when you looked at Daniel's medical records, he was having these feelings long before he was taking any medication. Daniel William Marsh's trial began on September 2, 2014. Daniel was now 17 years old, and the trial was being presided over by Judge David Reed. Daniel's attorneys claimed that the side effects of the medication he had taken, combined with his mental health issues, triggered an uncontrollable rage and violence and rendered him temporarily insane. But the prosecution said that Daniel had carefully planned the murder and the entire event had been premeditated for a long time. Daniel's old friends and his ex-girlfriend all took to the stand to tell their sides of the story, and Daniel's old therapist and psychiatrist also spoke of their time working with and treating him. On September 26, 2014, after a 5-week trial and less than 2 hours of deliberations, the jury had reached a unanimous verdict. Daniel William Marsh was found guilty on both counts of first-degree murder and all the special circumstances. The next big task of the jury was to determine whether Daniel was deemed sane or insane. For days later, they had reached that verdict too. The jury found Daniel to be sane when he had committed the murders. Judge Reed sentenced Daniel to the maximum term of life in prison with parole eligibility after 52 years. He was given 25 years to life for each count of murder, plus 2 years for special enhancements. Judge Reed pointed out that Daniel was proud of his crime and mutilated the victims' bodies out of curiosity. He also stated that Daniel's actions were not recklessly impulsive. They were very much pre-planned and thought out. When Senate Bill 260 was passed regarding the sentencing of juvenile offenders, it meant that if the sentence given was less than 25 years to life, when the offender reached their 20th year of incarceration, they could be eligible for parole. If the sentence is greater than 25 years to life, eligibility for parole would occur in their 25th year of incarceration. California voters also passed Proposition 57 in 2016. This meant that judges in a juvenile court must decide whether a young offender be tried in an adult court or a juvenile one. 2 years later, the Supreme Court in California ruled that this could be applied retroactively for cases that hadn't yet reached their conclusion. In February 2018, the California Court of Appeal conditionally reversed Daniel's 2014 conviction. It would now need to be decided whether he should continue to serve his adult sentence. A transfer hearing was held and prosecutors filed a motion to transfer him to an adult court, but the legal complexities surrounding the case continued to create many difficulties. Governor Jerry Brown signed Senate Bill 1391 into law. This meant that juveniles under the age of 16 could not be tried in an adult court. Senate Bill 1391 caused vocal opposition from both prosecutors and the family and friends of Chip and Claudia. In September 2018, the California District Attorney Association held a press conference urging the governor to veto the bill. The family of Chip and Claudia presented their cases and highlighted the damage Daniel had caused. And alongside this, prosecutors also wrote an open letter to Governor Brown, which read in part, Senate Bill 1391 eliminates the authority for a court to decide whether a 14 or 15-year-old charged with certain serious offenses is unfit for the juvenile system. In reference to Daniel, it said he savagely tortured and murdered an elderly couple in their home and methodically planned his attack. It wasn't just the families of Chip and Claudia who were outraged. Citizens of Davis sent over 300 letters to the court stating their opposition to Daniel being remanded in the juvenile justice system. Upon signing the bill, Governor Brown said that there was a need for redemption and reformation where possible. There is a fundamental principle at stake here. Whether we want a society which at least attempts to reform the youngest offenders before consigning them to adult prisons where their likelihood of becoming a lifelong criminal is so much higher, he said. He did note, however, that the testimonies he had heard from Chip and Claudia's family had weighed heavily on him. As the legal battles were being fought back and forth, a video was uploaded to YouTube. It showed Daniel Marsh giving a TED Talk from prison entitled Embracing Our Humanity. He detailed alleged abuse and difficulties he had faced in his life and said that he was now a reformed character and should be given another chance. The video caused enormous hurt and distress to Chip and Claudia's family as well as many others affected by Marsh's actions. The video was taken down by YouTube within 2 days of its upload, but it is still available to view on the internet. The takedown of the video was a small victory, the family said, but nothing compared to the legal battle that lay ahead. Daniel's defense team filed for a motion of continuance of the hearing for after January. This meant that by then, Senate Bill 1391 would be effective. Prosecutors hit back, however, saying that the case was being heard and dealt with current law, not a law that was in the future and yet to come. Despite their best efforts, the defense's motion was denied and the hearing went ahead. During the hearing, Daniel took to the stand himself to state why he felt his case should be heard in a juvenile court as opposed to an adult one. But the prosecution came in strong, and as part of their case, they called Matthew Logan to the stand. Matthew Logan was a forensic psychologist and an expert in psychopathy. He explained on the psychopathy checklist, Daniel had scored 35.8 out of a potential 40. He said this was one of the highest scores he had ever seen. The tension was palpable. Judge McAdam was about to read his decision. He ruled in favor of the prosecution. Daniel was remanded to state prison to continue serving his adult sentence. Judge McAdam said the risk posed by potentially releasing him was not one worth taking. There is virtually no chance that Marsh will be rehabilitated before he turns 25 years old, he said. Claudia's daughter Victoria voiced her relief, saying, "It's not about getting justice for Mom and Chip. We got that in 2014. This hearing was about safety for our family and our friends and the community of Davis." Less than a month after this decision was reached, Daniel filed a writ requesting that the order of transfer be reviewed. The issue that had to be considered was had Judge McAdam abused his discretion by holding the hearing before the Senate bill went into effect. This writ was declined, but the legal battles did not stop there. On the 14th of December 2018, Daniel's team filed a petition requesting that the order denying the writ was reviewed. The petition raised the same issues as the writ itself, and on the 13th of February 2019, the writ was denied by the California Supreme Court. As the Senate bill was now in full force, his attorneys filed an appeal requesting that Daniel's conviction be overturned retroactively. In September 2021, this appeal was dismissed by the 3rd District Court. Despite the numerous hearings, appeals, and changes to the law, Daniel Marsh's sentence of 52 years to life still stands. But because he was convicted as a juvenile, he is still eligible for parole after 25 years. If he is successful, he will be in his early 40s. The impact of Daniel Marsh's actions were felt by so many people. Special Agent Chris Campion had interrogated Daniel and said that the idea of him ever being released from custody filled him with dread, and that he is in the top 3 people he is most scared of. Campion believes that Daniel was, without a doubt, a serial killer in the making. For the family and friends of Chip and Claudia that already suffered through so much pain, the added angst and uncertainty surrounding the legal changes in Daniel's possible release weighed heavily on them. Claudia's daughter Victoria described the family as exhausted, but they let their presence be known and their voices be heard throughout the trial and at all the press conferences and hearings. They are still working hard to keep Chip and Claudia's names alive and will continue to fight to see that justice for the loving and caring couple continues to be served. The case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theater and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lily impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theater category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily started a new job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m., announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The pheasant's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia, Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lily's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. He didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lily was most vulnerable and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous and she did not suffer. An hour later, he gathered Lily's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James' death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hustville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. Plumstead, South East London. A busy and bustling area offset with commons and walking paths, making up what are called the Green Chain Walks. The many routes cover several miles and boast beautiful and relaxing scenery. It was an area that many people felt safe in. However, this feeling of safety and security was shattered, as throughout the 1980s and 90s, a monster was stalking the streets of Plumstead. A series of horrifying and violent rapes and sex attacks were committed on the Green Chain Walks. The police investigation was a complex one. They appeared to be dealing with two different types of attacks. The first would take place in open areas like Plumstead Common and Winds Common. These appeared to be at random and unplanned attacks. The second type appeared to be premeditated. After watching and stalking his victim, he would attack them in their home. The one sinister trait that ran through the attacks was that he would target young mothers accompanied by their children. On one of these occasions, he raped a mother in the upstairs bedroom while her children were downstairs having breakfast. As he left, he said to her, "You should keep your door locked." As the investigation into the savage attacks continued, the country would be rocked by a sadistic and horrifying murder. Wimbledon, London. Famed for its tennis championships, people come from all over the world to experience the prestigious Grand Slam, as well as enjoy the picturesque Common. July 15, 1992. Rachel McHale took her 2-year-old son Alex and the family dog for a walk on Wimbledon Common. Born in 1968, she had become a mother in her early 20s. Rachel and her partner Andre lived with their son Alex near the Common. She adored being a mother and doted on her son. Another dog walker was heading to a more secluded area of the Common when he heard a young child saying, "Wake up, Mummy." Following the sound of the voice, he soon came across a disturbing scene. Rachel McHale had been brutally stabbed, slashed, and sexually assaulted. Alex was found clinging to her lifeless body, begging her to wake up. It was revealed she had been stabbed 49 times in a frenzied and ferocious attack. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Alex was not physically harmed. This was an area popular with families, and even the more secluded parts of the Common were still fairly open. The fact her clothes were disheveled indicated a sexual motive for the murder. The Metropolitan Police came under immense pressure to catch the killer before they struck again. The ferocity of the murder left people terrified that it wouldn't be long until there was another one. 32 men were questioned over the murder, but the police's sights soon fell on one man. Colin Stagg was known for walking his dog on Wimbledon Common. He was from nearby Roehampton and was somewhat of a social outcast. He also allegedly fit the description given by a few witnesses of a man seen in the area around the time of the murder. Because of the lack of forensic evidence to tie him to the murder or crime scene, police decided to take a different route. They asked criminal psychologist Paul Britton to create a profile of the kind of person they were looking for. They quickly decided that Stagg matched the profile and thus launched Operation Estill. Operation Estill was a covert operation designed in part by Paul Britton to see if Colin Stagg would implicate himself in the murder or give anything away. As the investigation into Colin Stagg continued, so too did the Green Chain rapes. The police hadn't connected the rapes to the murder of Rachel Nichol. The sex attacks that followed appeared to be emulating the Wimbledon Common murder. The violence in the rapes began to escalate. More victims began to report that the attacker was armed with a knife. One of the biggest issues the police force had was that the descriptions of the rapist were varied and vague. The man was described as around 5'7" or 5'8". The police continued to make appeals and issued an e-fit of the suspect. Several people came forward and said the e-fit looked like a Plumstead resident, Robert Napper. When officers went to speak with him, they quickly realized he was far taller than the description given of the rapist. Napper stood at around 6'2". Due to this discrepancy in height, officers ruled him out. Robert Napper's name, however, just kept coming up. It was reported that a peeping Tom was spying in the windows of houses, especially one inhabited by a lone female. He was subsequently arrested. Following his arrest, the police searched his flat on Plumstead High Street. The flat was a singular room and was tidy and organized. They also found a red metal toolbox containing hunting knives. They found an AZ Maps book with routes planned out and locations highlighted. Covered part of the Green Chain Walk. The contents of the toolbox were not linked to the Green Chain rapes. As part of Operation Estill, the police sent in an undercover officer from the Metropolitan Police Special Operations Group, SO-10. She contacted Stagg and posed as the friend of a woman he had contacted through a Lonely Hearts column. Over the following 5 months, she pretended to be interested in Stagg, spoke to him on the phone, and exchanged letters detailing sexual fantasies. She also met with him, and on one of these occasions during a meeting in Hyde Park, they spoke about Rachel's murder. To try and get Stagg to implicate himself, the undercover officer claimed to enjoy hurting people. His mumbled reply was, when she went on to say, he replied, after winning his trust, the officer worked on getting Stagg to talk about his sexual fantasies. She then passed these on to Paul Britton, and he interpreted said fantasies as violent. Colin Stagg did not, however, admit to the murder of Rachel Nichol. Following the undercover investigation, Colin Stagg was subsequently arrested for the murder of Rachel Nichol, but he maintained his innocence. The psychologist who helped design Operation Estill said he vehemently disagreed with the use of the letters detailing sexual fantasies, and that he didn't know about their existence until after they had been sent. The case went to trial at the Old Bailey, and the problems in the investigation were laid bare. Mr. Justice Ognall said that the excessive zeal shown by investigators was, he excluded the entrapment evidence, forcing the prosecution to withdraw its case. The case was thrown out, and in September 1994, Colin Stagg was sensationally acquitted of murdering Rachel Nichol. One of the residents of Plumstead was 27-year-old Samantha Bissett. She lived in the basement flat on the edge of Winds Common with her partner Conrad and their 4-year-old daughter Jasmine. Samantha was a keen camera woman and often filmed her young daughter, documenting her life as she grew up. Conrad described Samantha as a feisty woman and a feminist, determined to give her daughter the best start in life she possibly could. Jasmine was a bright, chatty, and happy little girl. She got on well with children and adults alike and shared a deep and close bond with her parents. Samantha would often take Jasmine outside to play on the surrounding grass and in the wooded areas, making sure she had plenty of time outdoors. Conrad arrived home and found the flat door locked. Believing Samantha must have taken Jasmine out, he let himself in. He noticed an odd stain on the carpet as he opened the front door. Upon going into the kitchen, he saw Samantha's clothes strewn all over the floor. It was then he realized that something was seriously wrong. After he entered the living room, the horrifying picture of what had occurred came to light. Someone had forced their way into Samantha's flat and stabbed her more than 70 times in the chest and neck. She had also been mutilated post-mortem. Then came the next question. Where was Jasmine? Jasmine was found in her bedroom where she had been sexually assaulted and then smothered to death. Detective Sergeant Alan Jackerman was one of the first officers to arrive at the Bissett residence. He explained that this did not appear to be a first offense. This was a criminal whose violence had escalated and progressed to this point. The crime scene was so horrific, the police photographer needed to take 2 years off work as it had completely traumatized him. She had been stabbed with such ferocity it is believed she had died quickly. The killer then dragged her body into the living room before mutilating her. Forensic examinations initially turned up nothing. Due to the lack of fingerprints, it was believed that the murderer had worn gloves. But further analysis revealed that the fingerprints of the killer were almost identical to Samantha's, meaning they weren't initially distinguished from each other. When they were checked against police records, it came back with a match. Robert Napper. In May 1994, officers went to his flat and took him into custody. Samantha's partner Conrad described that she had woken up one night and had seen a face in the window staring at her as she slept. It is believed that this was Robert Napper and that he had been stalking her before killing her. Around the time of the murder, a witness reported hearing the voices of 2 male assailants, with one shouting at the other to leave it. It is believed that this was Napper, arguing with and shouting at himself. When it was announced that Napper had been arrested, those who were his acquaintances and those who worked with him were shocked by the nature of the horrific killing. The usually quiet and withdrawn Napper did not, on the face of it, seem like the kind of person capable of committing such an offense. But who exactly was Robert Napper? He was born on February 25, 1966 to Brian and Pauline. Shortly after his birth, his parents moved from Erith, London to the nearby area of Plumstead, and he was the oldest of 4 siblings. Napper's childhood was highly dysfunctional and marred by domestic violence. He often saw his father attacking his mother, and fights between the pair were frequent. When Robert turned 9, his parents divorced. Concerned for their welfare, social services had him and his siblings removed from the home and taken into care. They also had to undergo psychiatric evaluations to assess the damage their tumultuous childhood had caused, and subsequently required treatment. Robert would have psychiatric treatment at Maudsley Hospital for 6 years. Robert's school life was also deeply unhappy. He attended Abbeywood Comprehensive, where he had frequent problems. As a result of having undiagnosed autism spectrum disorder, previously referred to as Asperger's, he was socially awkward and struggled to make and maintain friendships in his class. He was often the target of bullies and was picked on by both boys and girls. His peers would later refer to Robert as being despised throughout the school. At the age of 13, his life was turned upside down. While away on a camping trip, he was sexually assaulted by a family friend. The perpetrator would be sent to prison, but the damage had been done. Napper became introverted and would obsess over being clean, organized, and tidy. He became even more reclusive and distant, and his personality began to take a more sinister turn. He started spying on his younger sister while she was naked, and began to bully his other siblings too. When he was a teenager, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He would often be unable to distinguish reality from imagination. He would tell stories of being pursued by the IRA, captured and tortured by them with his fingers being cut off, and him being able to grow them back. It wouldn't be long until Robert Napper was on the police's radar. In 1986, Napper was convicted of an offense with an airgun. Despite his convictions, at the age of 27, he got a job at a plastics factory working as a machine operator. He also moved into a flat in Plumstead and became increasingly isolated. His relationship with his motherhood also began to break down, partly due to his hatred of her new partner. While in custody for the murder of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett, officers researched his home. Further examination of the red toolbox found in his flat drew the police's attention back to the maps they had found. Napper had made a number of notes which corresponded with several of the green chain rapes. The police soon realized that the man they had in custody for the brutal double murder was most likely responsible for the more than 70 rapes and sex attacks that had been committed on the green chain walks. They also realized that the height discrepancy was due to the fact that Napper walked with a stoop, this appearing to be shorter than he actually was. His first rape is believed to have taken place in 1989, in a house that was on the edge of the common. It turned out that he had confessed as such to his mother, saying that he had raped a woman on Plumstead Common and that people were out to get him. She went to the police and told them what he had said to her. No case on file matched what his mother had told them, and no further action was taken. After this, Pauline Napper severed all ties with her son. It turned out that the sex attack had actually occurred on Wynn's Common, meaning the police records didn't match his mother's report. In October 1995, Robert Napper went on trial at the Old Bailey Courthouse in London for the brutal double murder of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett. Despite the initial concerns that they may not have had enough to convict him, a jury was not required in this case. He pled guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, citing psychiatric problems. He was sentenced to be held at the high-security Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital. Although this case had been solved, there was another that lingered over the heads of everyone. Rachel Nichol. With a botched police investigation and a wrongful arrest, the police needed to find the culprit, but the case had all but stalled. In December 1995, police went to Broadmoor to interview Robert in connection with Rachel's murder. He refused to answer their questions, leaving them back at square one. In the years that passed, and with the police no closer to catching Rachel's killer, on the anniversary of the murder, the public pressure to find the culprit came back into the spotlight. 10 years after Rachel's death, DNA techniques had become more refined and readily available to the police. In 2002, Scotland Yard set up a cold case review team to look into Rachel Nichol's murder and try and unearth any new clues. The team was comprised of both current and retired investigators who pored over witness statements, looked at the files of potential suspects, and also considered the possibility that it may be linked to other crimes. When looking at the injuries that Rachel had sustained during the frenzied attack and compared it with other attacks, they consulted those on the forensics team about the improvements that had been made in the science of DNA. They were able to lift the blood from Rachel's clothing and, underneath, lay the breakthrough they were looking for. In July 2003, it was reported that after 18 months of testing on the clothes worn by Rachel, a microscopic sample of male DNA, which did not belong to either her boyfriend or young son, had been found. The sample was enough to rule people out, but not enough to confirm the identity of the killer. A sample had been taken from the hair of Rachel's son Alex, and, upon reanalysis, it was found to contain samples of paint that they were able to trace to a metal toolbox. In July 2006, a team from Scotland Yard headed to Broadmoor Hospital. They wanted to talk to the now 40-year-old Robert Napper. Officers were there for 2 days while they interviewed him about a potential connection to the murder of Rachel Napper. Finally, after more than a decade of waiting, the police got the news they had been hoping for. The microscopic DNA found on Rachel Napper's clothing came back as a match to Robert Napper. The paint from the toolbox found in Alex's hair also matched the toolbox used by Napper to hide his knives and maps. When looking at the map found in Napper's toolbox, police found something of interest. The map showed he had ventured out of his comfort zone. The distance between Wimbledon Common and Plumstead had led to him being ruled out initially, despite the similarities in the cases. On one of the pages, Isabella Plantation in Richmond Park had been heavily marked. This was within a walking distance of where Rachel had been murdered. On the 28th of November 2007, Robert Clive Napper was charged with the murder of Rachel Nichol. On the 4th of December that year, he appeared at the City of Westminster's Magistrates' Court. He was subsequently granted bail on the condition he be returned to Broadmoor. It would soon be time for him to enter his plea, and on the 24th of January 2008, he pled not guilty. His trial started in November that year, and the following month, he changed his plea. He entered a plea of guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nichol on the grounds of diminished responsibility. When sentencing Napper, Mr. Justice Griffith Williams said that it was vital he be detained indefinitely for the protection of the public, saying he was a very dangerous man. It is highly unlikely that Robert Napper will ever be released. When Napper was sentenced, Colin Stagg received a public apology from the Metropolitan Police for his wrongful arrest. Keith Preda, the detective who headed the investigation into Colin Stagg, received intense public scrutiny. Despite the judge condemning their actions and Colin Stagg being acquitted, in the years that followed and before Napper was caught, Preda continued to press the idea that Stagg was guilty of Rachel Nakel's murder. In 2001, he told the ITV program Real Crime, Colin Stagg has been through a version of justice, albeit truncated, and he has been found not guilty, but I wonder whether he can actually say hand on heart that he believes people will meet him in the streets and believe that. After Stagg was acquitted, Preda retired from the police force. He would later go on to face charges of corruption. The determination of the police to prove Colin Stagg was responsible was revealed to have used £3 million from the public purse, as estimated by an internal review. The same review also found that vital scientific information had been missed during the investigation. Following the 14 months he spent in custody, Colin Stagg sued the police force for damages totaling £1 million. He has co-authored 2 books about his case, Who Really Killed Rachel with novelist David Kessler, and Pariah with journalist Ted Hans. Pariah was published on the same day Napper appeared in court to enter his plea for Rachel's murder. In 2010, the Independent Police Complaints Commission released a report following an investigation into the conduct and actions of the Metropolitan Police Force. It detailed what it described as a catalog of bad decisions and errors. It suggested that had the police acted accordingly on the tip-offs about Napper and his behavior, including the one by his own mother, the lives of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett could have been spared. The Independent Police Complaints Commission said that as all officers involved had retired and a key senior officer had died, nobody would face disciplinary action. It also ruled out any criminal prosecutions. The female police officer who went undercover in Operation Estel took early retirement from the police in 1998. She would later sue the Metropolitan Police Force after being given support by the Police Federation for damages. It was settled out of court and she received £125,000. This move prompted harsh criticism, including from Rachel Nakel's son when he got older, who had received less than a fifth of that, just £22,000, from the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority. The criminal psychologist who helped form the investigation, Paul Britton, was charged with professional misconduct by the British Psychological Society. However, in 2002, further action was dismissed due to a time delay in the proceedings being brought. After the intense media scrutiny following the murder, Rachel Nakel's partner Andre moved to France with their son. He wrote a book about Rachel's death called The Last Thursday in July, detailing what it was like to go through such a profound loss under such intense media scrutiny and public interest. On August 13, 2008, it was announced by the Home Office that Colin Stagg would receive compensation, totaling £706,000. The extent of Robert Napper's crimes may never be fully known, and the damage and hurt his actions have caused are incalculable. Conrad Elam continues to keep the memory of his partner Samantha and daughter Jasmine alive, talking about them and the impact they had on so many people, ensuring they will never be forgotten. Rachel Nakel's partner Andre wrote a public letter of apology to Colin Stagg for pointing the finger at him publicly, saying in an interview with The Guardian, her son Alex remains incredibly close to his father and they now live in Barcelona. Alex went on to write a book about his experiences titled Letting Go, a true story of murder, loss, and survival. According to Andre, Rachel continues to live on through their son. Sadistic serial killer Michael Madison. 2 weeks shy of Halloween, 1977, Michael Madison was born on October 15th in Cleveland, Ohio. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, accidentally got pregnant and didn't have much of a relationship at the time of his birth. John Baldwin mussed Diane to care for their young son and denied being Michael's father. Growing up, Diane's mother had been a sex worker and heroin addict. She grew up in a household full of neglect. Diane's upbringing left her unprepared to care for her young son independently. Shortly after giving birth to her son, Michael, social workers were brought into the home. Diane was allowing her constant stream of boyfriends to punish Michael. When Michael was 2, Diane was found to have forcefully stuffed food down Michael's throat. As a result, the toddler began vomiting uncontrollably. Unsure of what to do, Diane put her screaming son into a tub full of hot water. This caused Michael to cry more. Growing frustrated with her young son, Diane took him out of a bath and beat him with an extension cord. A year later, one of Diane's many boyfriends beat Michael so severely with a belt that the young boy vomited and needed to be hospitalized. In another horrific incident, Michael was beaten so severely by another one of Diane's boyfriends that he lost hearing in one of his ears. After years of abuse, Michael was sent to live with his grandmother, who was still a heroin addict and sex worker. But unfortunately, Michael's horrific childhood wouldn't change. Michael continued to be hospitalized for reasons such as dehydration. The social workers involved in Michael's case would note that he and his half-brother were covered in scratches and bruises. Before Michael reached high school, he had become a familiar face to law enforcement. On several occasions, the teenager had been flabusing lemon. In high school, he received a delinquent charge for inappropriately touching another classmate. The crimes Michael committed as a teenager were nothing like the ones he would go on to commit as an adult. In July 2013, the family of 38-year-old Angela Deskins reported her missing after they hadn't heard from her since June. Deskins was known for disappearing from time to time, so the family didn't think much of it. A month after she went missing, her body was discovered wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. 28-year-old Shadishia Sheely was reported missing in September 2012 when she didn't show up at her mother's house. Sheely, along with her 12-year-old daughter, were living with extended family at the time, and Sheely was supposed to stop by her mother's house to borrow some money, but she never showed. Her body was found in July 2013 inside a plastic garbage bag. After returning home from her job at an elementary school, 18-year-old Cheryl Deturi disappeared. Her body was also found inside a black trash bag. On July 19, 2013, Michael's neighbors called the police to report a horrible smell coming from a garage near his second-floor apartment building. Inside the garage, the police discovered the decomposing body of a woman. During the police search of the surrounding area, including other vacant homes and backyards, the police found the bodies of 2 more women. Each was wrapped in plastic bags and located approximately 200 yards apart. The police were cranked at a search warrant for Michael's home, and inside they found further evidence of decomposition. Now the search was on to find where Michael Madison was. The police tracked him down to his mother's house. When they arrived, Michael refused to come out, resulting in a several-hour-long standoff between him and the police before he finally agreed to come out and was taken into police custody. Michael never once showed remorse to the victims during the trial. Michael laughed, smiled, and 20'd the families. During Sherella Terry's father's victim impact statement, Michael smiled at the distraught father. This set Terry's father off, and he tried to attack Michael but was quickly stopped. Michael didn't stop smiling once during the altercation. The jury deliberated less than a day before Michael Madison was found guilty of all 3 murders. He was also found guilty of 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. On May 20, 2016, Michael was sentenced to death, a sentence he would attempt to appeal a month later. On July 21, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold the death sentence for Michael Madison. Killer Ronald O'Brien. Children are cautioned from an early age not to accept candy from strangers. While this golden rule is strictly enforced by vigilant parents throughout the year, on Halloween night, they throw caution to the wind and allow their little ones to go door to door asking for treats. In most instances, their request is granted without worry. Even so, once in a while, the monsters that lurk in the shadows take advantage of the occasion, resulting in dire consequences for the most innocent among us. In 1974, a boy in Pasadena, Texas fell victim to just such a predator when he became violently ill her indulging in a treat from his Halloween bag. Ever the concerned parent, his father had stayed by his side during the hour-long ordeal, offering comfort to the youngster as he convulsed on the bathroom floor. Only 8 years old at the time, Timothy O'Brien died later that night on his way to the hospital. In a shocking turn of events, an autopsy revealed that he had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 grown men. As difficult as it was to believe, all signs pointed to the fact that someone had deliberately laced candy with a colorless compound before randomly handing it out to unsuspecting children. Investigators were convinced that a cold-blooded killer was hiding somewhere in the suburbs of Houston, and they intended to find him. With no suspects in mind and little evidence to go on, detectives theorized that an unscrupulous person who was angry at the world in general had decided to take the life of a complete stranger, a child no less, as a way of getting back at society. To make a difficult situation even worse, there was no telling how many children have received the tainted sweets. Although authorities had put out an emergency news bulletin requesting that all Halloween candy be brought to the police station for inspection, they feared that there would be other victims before all was said and done. While they faced an uphill battle to be sure, investigators did have a few things working in their favor. For one, it had been raining heavily on the evening of Trick or Treat, which had limited the number of houses that Timothy and his sister Elizabeth had visited. More importantly, a chemical analysis of the contents of the boys' treat bank and enabled them to pinpoint the carrier of the poison. Lab tests revealed that the killer's lethal weapon of choice had been the sweet and sour powder contained inside of a straw-shaped pixie sticks. After meeting with the residents of the houses where the O'Brien children were known to have gotten candy, detectives were confident that none of them had given up pixie sticks. However, during the course of their interviews, they learned that someone had been witnessed doling out that particular trick and that someone had been Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien. When he was brought in for questioning, O'Brien claimed that a man he had never seen before had emerged from a darkened home and given him several pixie sticks to hand out on his behalf. He added that after consuming a small amount of the sugary powder, Timothy had complained that it tasted funny. Instead of telling him to throw it out, he had given his son a soft drink to help wash it down. Under the pretense of helping police solve the case, he had readily provided them with the address of the house where the exchange had taken place. Upon speaking with the mystery man, who turned out to be an air traffic controller named Clarkney Melvin, officers learned that he had an alibi for the night in question. According to him, he had been at work and had not returned home until after midnight. When they visited his place of employment, his supervisor confirmed his story and had the paperwork to prove it. In a stunning show of support, 200 of Melvin's co-workers came forward to vouch for his character. Realizing that they had been duped, investigators quickly concluded that this man was not their killer, something that Ronald O'Brien had known all along. Bit of digging into his past uncovered that Ronald O'Brien, who had trained as an optician, was not nearly as respectable as he wanted others to believe. "I'm not content who couldn't hold a job." He was drowning in a sea of debt. Not above taking what he wanted, he had been accused of stealing on numerous occasions, usually by former employers. While being shiftless and prone to theft doesn't necessarily mean that someone is capable of murder, the fact that O'Brien had taken out hefty life insurance policies, not 1 but 3, on his children in the months prior to his son's untimely death moved him to the top of the list of suspects. Another nail in O'Brien's self-constructed coffin tamed when it was discovered that he had phoned the insurance company on the morning after his son's death inquiring about a payout. As the 8-year-old's body lay in the icy morgue, his father's only concern had been how quickly the money he had coming would change hands. On November 5, 1974, less than a week after Timothy was poisoned, Ronald O'Brien was taken into custody and formally charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. To no one's surprise, he pleaded not guilty across the board. He would steadfastly maintain his innocence throughout the trial, despite the damning evidence against him. During the proceedings, a parade of witnesses testified that O'Brien had become fixated on the properties of cyanide in the months leading up to his son's murder. His obsession led him to praise him to ask friends and family alike if they knew where he could purchase the deadly poison. He would also inquire of them if they had any idea how much of the substance it would take to kill a person. In June of 1975, 8 months after little Timothy O'Brien had been laid to rest, his father was convicted of his murder. He was also found guilty in the attempted poisonings of the other 4 children, none of whom had ingested the legal powder. For his crimes, Ronald O'Brien, whom the press had dubbed the Candyman, was condemned to the electric chair. Down the road, as alternative methods of execution were introduced, his punishment was amended to a more humane death by lethal injection. It had taken the jury just over an hour to decide the fate of the man who had so callously plotted and carry up the murder of someone who had trusted him implicitly. Once the verdict was in, the waiting game began. As it happened, 9 years would pass more time than Timothy had spent on this earth before his tiller would face flammable justice. During his time on death row, O'Brien was reviled by his fellow inmates who, despite their own misdeeds, considered him to be lower than a snake's belly. Their hatred of the child killer ran so deep that they had thrown a party on the day of his demise to let him know that he would not be missed. After several stays of execution, O'Brien was put to death on March 31, 1984, at the age of 39. When asked if he had any last words, he had taken the opportunity to rail against the system that had allowed him to come to such an end. When his death was announced over the loudspeaker, hundreds of people who had gathered outside the prison to celebrate the occasion had shouted "trick or treat," while throwing handfuls of candy in the air in remembrance of Timothy, a young boy who had paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Todd Allen Reed, the Forest Park Tiller. The bodies of 3 women were found in the same stretch of parkland, all within a month of each other. It was not long before police had their man. But is he responsible for more than the 3 murders they convicted him for? 32-year-old Todd Allen Reed was already a registered sex offender when he strangled to death at least 3 women before dunking their naked bodies in Forest Park, a heavily wooded area just west of Portland, Oregon. From 1992 to 1995, he had served a measly 2.5 years of a 12-year sentence for the sexual assault of Shelley Harding, who was 7 months pregnant at the time of his cowardly attack. She had been walking home from work when he approached her and forced her into his car at knife point. Reed was involved to him and fled the scene of a minor crash with another vehicle on his way to the secluded spot where he sexually assaulted Shelley. After he had assaulted her, he attempted to strangle her with a seat belt and began to cry. Shelley was strong and she was calm. She had been talking to Reed constantly like he was a friend, almost building a rapport. Whilst doing so, she made sure to leave as much physical evidence as she could, touching every surface to leave as many of her prints as possible. Whatever this monster was going to do to her, she wasn't going to make it easy for him to get away with. When Reed broke down, she used this to her advantage, and her pleas to be let go and her promises that she would not tell anyone worked. Reed let her go. Not only did Shelley report her abduction and assault, the 2 men that had been in the car that Reed had crashed into also reported the hit and run. They even had his license plate. Reed pleaded no contest and was handed the 12-year sentence. He was registered as a sex offender and, crucially, his DNA was taken and stored in the state crime lab. This would be the golden ticket police needed to catch the Forest Park serial killer 7 years later. Reed was released early as he had built up sentence-reducing credits, half of which were for good behavior. At roughly 8 miles long and 5,100 acres, Forest Park is one of the largest urban forest reserves in the USA, ranked 19th to be more precise. It is not easy to wander from the 70 miles of trails to the park's dense vegetation. To highlight just how secluded this park can get, once you're off trail, in 2004, a 53-year-old man called Frank and his 12-year-old daughter Ruth were discovered to be living off-grid in the park. They had been there for 4 years, completely undetected. On May 7, 1999, a couple walking their dog on one of the park's more and more trails would come across the body of 28-year-old Wella Faye Mahler. She was naked and face down, entangled in thick blackberry brambles. She had been strangled, and it was determined that her body had been there for around 2 months. Police would find a used condom merely 28 feet from her body. They were able to extract DNA from this vital piece of evidence. The next day, May 8th, police themselves would discover a second body whilst they were searching the immediate area. The body of 26-year-old Stephanie Lynn Mussel was found around 1/4 of a mile away from where Lilla had been discovered. She too was found naked and had been strangled. Tests would determine she had been left there less than a week before she was found. They would also recover traces of DNA on her thighs. A group of hikers would find the third body, that of 18-year-old Alexandria Eisen, in the early evening of June 2nd. Alexandria had been reported missing sometime in May. Police were unable to reach her body until the next day. Due to the location, she'd been dumped down an extremely steep slope just off of a deer path. She was found naked, and she too had been strangled. Her body was around 1/4 of a mile away from Lua and Stephanie's. After the discovery of Alexandria's body, Police Chief Charles Moves admitted that investigators had concluded they were looking for a serial killer due to the similarities of the crimes. Physically, all three women resembled each other, but they also had very similar life experiences. They were all homeless at the time of their deaths and had cocaine and heroin addictions, although Stephanie had just completed a detox program before her murder. Lila and Alexandria, or had been at some point, engaged in prostitution to pay for these addictions. All three women were known to frequent West Burnside Street. It's also been claimed that Lila and Stephanie knew each other. Although this has not been proven either way, it was determined that all three of the women had been murdered elsewhere and their bodies were taken to Forest Park afterwards. Toxicology all showed that they had taken heroin sometime before their deaths. The police response was immediate and it was impressive. A specialist task force consisting of 16 individuals was formed and they set about scouting bars, reaching out and offering protection to the community being targeted, and 30 additional beds were made available for homeless women during the investigation. Although residents were not happy about the lack of information they were receiving, the police kept their investigation tightly under wraps. Such was their determination to catch this killer. The task force would use the physical similarities of the three women to their advantage. A female officer of a similar appearance posed as a prostitute in West Burnside Street to see if they could reel the killer in. And sure enough, Reed took the bait. On the July 7th, the same day a vigil was being held for Lila, Stephanie and Alexandria, approached the undercover officer. And it was not long before his suspicious behavior flagged him to police. At about 5:20 a.m., he was approached by a member of the lookout team, Sergeant John Botchlet. Regrettably admitted that he was a sex offender and agreed to a search of his vehicle. They found in a used condom a book entitled The Killing Gift about a woman who can kill men by merely looking at them, and some yellow strapping. There was nothing incriminating to be found and the police had to let him go. He was not the hook, however, far from it. Another lookout that night, Detective Sergeant Dave Schlegel, recognized him from the 1992 sexual assault case. He had in fact been the arresting officer. Police began 24-hour surveillance of both at his home and at his place of work. At least once during this surveillance, he was observed driving in circles around West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. The police web results came back and confirmed that the DNA from the condom at the Moore crime scene and the DNA found on Stephanie's thighs matched the DNA that was on file for Todd Allen Reed. At around 7:30 p.m. on July 18th, after Reed had left for work, police executed a search warrant at his address where he lived with his girlfriend. Once the police had left the premises, his girlfriend phoned him to let him know the police had been there. He attempted to make a getaway in the middle of his shift, but it was too late. The police had already arrived. At 11:30 p.m. on July 18th, 11 days after police had questioned him and only 1.5 months after the task force was set up, Reeve was arrested outside of Ranella Produce, the warehouse where he worked night shifts unloading the delivery trucks. On July 27th, he was indicted on 7 criminal counts in relation to 3 homicides. It emerged that Reed, who had been ordered to serve 8 years post-prison supervision and actually been kicked out of a sex offender treatment program 2 weeks before his arrest for failure to attend. On February 23, 2001, he pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Reed had been facing the death penalty, but his plea deal took this off of the table. Reed is also the prime suspect in 2, possibly 3 other murders in the Portland area. The cases being referred to by Reeves are the 1987 cold case murders of 15-year-old Jennifer Lynch, her and 12-year-old Mindy Colleen Thomas, and the 1999 disappearance of 19-year-old Amava Sines. In regards to the murders, Gresham Police Sergeant David Lerwick has been quoted as saying, "Always suspect that he was the person who killed both those girls. We didn't have enough evidence to convict him." Jennifer had gone missing on July 3, 1987, and her skeletal remains was found on July 8, 1988. Minky went missing from the apartment complex where she lived on August 3, 1987, and her body was discovered on October 4, 1988. Both of the children had been strangled and dumped in wooded areas on the eastern side of Gresham, about 3 miles apart, and they were both last seen in the company of Gail Bennett, Reed's then-girlfriend and later wife. They married in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Gresham police said Bennett, who has a police record of her own, might have information about the killings but has been uncooperative. Bennett has denied any knowledge. At the time, police were operating under the assumption that they had both been killed by the same man and that this man was known to them. They had questioned Reed at the time of the investigation due to the fact they had both been seen with Gail, but he was never charged or arrested. Police renewed efforts to solve the Gresham cases after his arrest in the Portland killings, but attempts to compare DNA from the old crimes with Reed's DNA have been inconclusive. Alma the witness seen on June 30, 1999 and has not been seen since. She was working as a prostitute at the time of her disappearance, and it has been claimed she knew / was friends with Alexandria Eisen. No charges have been brought forward in her case, although it is impossible to downplay the likelihood that they already had something to do with Ametha's disappearance. As of June 2020, Oat Prison Reed is in his not known, and as of June 2021, he was no longer listed as inhumate and may be dead. Marcelina Liza was rushed to a Pensacola, Florida hospital without knowing what had happened. Unfortunately, it was too late because she passed away the next day, which was December 31st, according to an autopsy. The young child had sustained a head injury, but what actually transpired on that terrible night, and what caused poor little Marcelina to suffer such tragedy? Niceville, Florida is a place renowned for its cozy small-town atmosphere. There, residents can explore a variety of recreational and historic sites in a generally tranquil environment. Imagine taking a stroll through a park or stopping by a historical site that has been preserved. The locals are typically friendly and hospitable, which frequently contributes to the town's reputation as being nice, not just in name, but also in spirit. The city's peace is somewhat counterbalanced by the crime rate, which, while not alarmingly high, is present. In this ostensibly tranquil setting, occurred the tragic case of Marcelina Liza. On December 15, 2000, the world welcomed Marcelina Liza into it. She entered Mary Jean Liza's life and brought the happiness. Marcelina developed into a lively young girl in her brief existence. Her dark hair and chubby cheeks framed her wide, inquisitive eyes. As of 2002, she was living in Niceville, Florida, in her mother, Mary Jean Liza's tundra care. Her father's identity is still unknown. Marcelina, a cheerful toddler, resided in a tight-knit neighborhood with her mother. Unknown to anyone, young Marcelina will unfortunately soon face darker times. Life appeared to be a routine for Marcelina Liza and her mother, Mary Jean, in their Niceville, Florida home on the morning of December 30, 2002. Routines for a 2-year-old typically revolve around the little pleasures in life, like breakfast and playing with a favorite toy. Like any other day, Marcelina's would have started with her mother, Mary, tending to her as she had done every day since she was born. However, December 30, 2002 was tragically unique. When Marcelina experienced a seizure and lost consciousness, her mother Mary noticed a startling and unsettling change. In a fit of panic, Marcelina was transported to a hospital in Pensacola, Florida, despite the medical team's best efforts. Marcelina's condition was critical at this point, and there was little hope. Marcelina tragically passed away the next day, on December 31, 2002, at the young age of 2 years. Her mother felt the crushing weight of this loss right away. Her sorrow was intense and real. Those close to Mary immediately alerted the authorities to the emergency because it appeared that Marcelina's death was a homicide. As soon as Marcelina's tragic death occurred, investigators flocked to the area. They started by interrogating Mary, Marcelina's mother, as well as the hospital staff who had treated the young child. A disturbing picture quickly became apparent. There were numerous wounds on Marcelina, including 18 bruises all over her frail body. After an autopsy, the medical examiner concluded that she had died of blunt force head trauma, which was consistent with homicide. The police had no leads or additional suspects at the time. They grilled Mary hard, trying to get to the bottom of what had happened to Marcelina. Mary, however, insisted that she was unable to recall any details of the incident and that she was ignorant of the manner in which her child had died. Mary's story changed on November 6, 2003, during a subsequent round of questioning. She admitted to the police that she may have lost consciousness out of rage and unintentionally hurt her child. Due to her remark, Mary was now the main suspect in Marcelina's death. However, establishing her guilt wasn't an easy task. She could not be definitively linked to the crime by the available evidence. Investigators conducted a thorough investigation and spoke with numerous witnesses. They discovered that Mary had a reputation for having a severe temper, but there was no prior information about her having blackouts. This new information was helpful, but it was still insufficient to positively identify Mary as the murderer. Marcelina's case heartbreakingly started to stall as the leads grew stale and the evidence remained circumstantial, ultimately becoming a cold case that left the community searching for answers and justice for a young life taken abruptly. Even though it had been almost 2 decades since the tragic death of Marcelina Liza, Captain David Allen of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office had not forgotten about the case, and his team of hard-working detectives wasn't prepared to let this cold case remain unsolved. They determined that it was time to re-examine all of the evidence related to Marcelina's passing after nearly 19 years. The team took a methodical approach. They desired to approach the evidence with fresh eyes, challenging all of their presumptions and casting doubt on others. For a new assessment of the case, they contacted the medical examiner's office. Could the initial analysis have contained an error somewhere? Captain Allen and his team were eager to learn the answer. There was a significant development in April 2021. A painstaking autopsy of Marcelina's remains was performed by the medical examiner, who made the tragic discovery that the young child had suffered from shaken baby syndrome. This condition typically occurs when a parent or caregiver shakes a baby or toddler violently out of frustration or anger, which is frequently sparked by a child's persistent crying. The child's brain moves back and forth within the skull as a result of this violent shaking, resulting in bruising, swelling, and frequently fatal bleeding of the brain. The reevaluation of this case took into account factors other than just the medical aspect. The team of detectives led by Captain Allen were aware that they required more. They dug through old records and conducted fresh interviews. They suddenly found themselves knocking on doors and conversing with individuals who might be able to provide the final pieces to this terrible puzzle. When Marcelina passed away, her mother reportedly told investigators that she had blacked out and was unaware of how her daughter had died. But as more witnesses came forward, the investigators began to hear a different account. For the first time in almost 2 decades, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together to form a coherent and unsettling picture as the evidence mounted. Captain Allen, who had the newly obtained evidence and testimonies in his possession, addressed the media, saying, "Based on the evidence we had and new interviews, we were able to submit an arrest warrant for felony murder on the mother." One can only imagine Mary Jean's shock when police officers showed up to take her into custody on September 23, 2022, almost 20 years after the tragic death of her daughter, Marcelina. After her daughter passed away, Mary relocated to California. She was apprehended there by deputies from the Yuba County Sheriff's Department. She was detained in the Yuba County Jail without bail. She was later returned to Okaloosa County, Florida, by the authorities, where she would be charged with at least 1 charge of murder. Okaloosa County Sheriff Eric Aiden expressed the fervent desire of his detectives to solve these and solve cases. For them, it's more than just a job. They are committed to searching for every piece of information that might reopen a case that has stagnated because they are passionate about their role in delivering justice. A nearly 20-year-old tragedy has been given new life in this case, thanks to the investigators' tireless efforts, which potentially brought closure and justice for young Marcelina Liza. 1985 born, Mary Jean Liza was caught in the eye of a terrifying storm. She was a 38 years old Asian or Pacific Islander woman. Mary resided at 2324 Pertania Circle in Navarre, Florida, for a few years following the passing of her daughter. Mary appeared to live a normal life, but she was notorious for having a hot temper. Her relationships were characterized by this quality, which cast a negative light on many of her interactions. Her temper was more than a simple annoyance. It was a dominant personality trait that could explode violently. Sadly, no one in her life seemed to be able to control this aspect of her. Although Mary had no history of criminal activity, her temper has now tragically come into conflict with the law. Given that she has never been convicted of a crime before, she is at a dark crossroad that no one would have predicted for her. Friends, neighbors, and other members of the community are still processing the shocking incident that resulted in her arrest. To find out what went so horribly wrong, the police were contacted right away. The tragic circumstances surrounding the death of the young child, Marcelina Lisa, are revealed by the details of the story. The details in the arrest report provide insight into a family arrangement that was rife with conflict and eventually ended tragically. Mary Jean Lisa, Marcelina's mother, did not have primary custody of her at the time, and she already had a case filed with the Florida Department of Children and Families. The primary guardians of Marcelina, whose names have not been made public, were planning a trip out of town. The Department of Children and Families gave Mary Jean permission to stay with Marcelina for an extended period of time because they value family. The agreement went into effect on December 20th, 2002. The first few days of the visit seemed to be going smoothly. 3 days after the overnight stay started, a caseworker went to the house. The caseworker saw Marcelina during the visits as active and healthy, with no indications of harm or distress. A couple of days later, on December 29th, Mary Jean's sister visited the house and also observed that the youngster seemed secure and healthy. Then December 30th, 2002, arrived. This would turn out to be a crucial and disastrous day. Mary Jean and her daughter were home alone on this particular day. Unidentified witnesses later picked them up and noticed something suspicious right away. Marcelina was unresponsive and drowsy. The witness inquired about Marcelina's condition from Mary Jean out of concern. Mary Jean responded by stating that Marcelina had been ill for a few days. Mary Jean had not taken her daughter to the doctor despite the illness. The day went on, and the situation got worse and worse. A terrifying turn of events occurred after Mary Jean changed Marcelina's diaper. Marcelina started to convulse and her breathing stopped. The witness and Mary Jean hastily drove the young girl to Twin Cities Hospital in Niceville in an effort to get medical help. When she was being examined, they found that she had a total of 18 contusions. A subsequent CT scan revealed persistent blood clots on the surface of the brain and signs of brain shrinkage. She was consequently transferred to Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, but tragically she did not survive. Mary was detained without bail while she awaited her court date and was forced to spend time in the bleak Yuba County Jail. There, she was listed under the official name Mary Jean Lisa. She was given a date to put on her calendar, February 13th, 2023. As the seriousness of her predicament grew more and more apparent, the date was supposed to be a pretrial conference rather than a trial. It was a significant stage in the legal procedure. The prosecution and defense would meet before the judge during this crucial pretrial conference. Usually, they talked about the evidence, thought about possible plea deals, and set the stage for how the trial might proceed. This conference would be a turning point in Mary's life, possibly determining the course of her future. The specifics of what happened during Mary's pretrial conference are currently being kept a closely guarded secret because they have not yet been made public. Sheriff Eric Aiden didn't think twice about taking a few minutes to address the neighborhood about the unsolved murder of Marcelina Lisa. He acknowledged the investigators at the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office for their unwavering commitment. He specifically expressed his appreciation for the Criminal Investigation Division's steadfast dedication to the case. Sheriff Aiden emphasized that he and his coworkers have a strong desire to re-examine old cases. They take a firm stance. Even if there isn't a quick fix, they are committed to looking, learning, and probing. Their goal is to gather any piece of knowledge or tiny piece of information that could bring them one step closer to solving the cold cases. This spirit of tenacity is best exemplified by the Marcelina Lisa case. It was evidence of the lengths the teen would go to see that justice was served. Families, neighbors, and friends felt compelled to reach out as details emerged and the community sought resolution. reaffirming their faith in the police and their pursuit of the truth. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.